It was the late 80s. I had always wanted to play drum. I had a pair of bongos, but I was mostly a guitar player. I found myself drumming on the guitar a lot. And it was suggested to me, why don't you go and take a drum class? So I headed off up into the mountains of upstate New York to go to a camp deep in the woods. There, I was going to study with Babatunde Olatunji. He was a really well-known drummer from Nigeria who taught West African drumming. I didn't have a proper drum, but I figured I would go and dance because there was also African dance, and I was really into that. The first day, I was sitting in class on the floor in the front because all of the drummers who had bigger drums were sitting in rows in the back. There were 100 of us in this class. There I was with a little tiny drum, and in walked the whole troop of African drummers. I was awestruck. I stopped breathing. They got in and they started doing all their setup, and they carried in these drums with carvings on them of faces. The talking drum player, who I later came to know as a friend named Sikiru, walked over to me and saw me holding this little drum, which turned out to be a talking drum that I was holding completely incorrectly. And he leaned over and said, I was so humiliated. I wanted to just disappear right there. But he reached out his hand to me and lifted me up and walked me over to one of the big giant drums with the carved faces in them. And he put my hand on top of the drum and he whispered in my ear, you play this one. I thought, wow, this is crazy. I wonder if this happens all the time. The drum head came up to my nose. I could barely see over the top of it while it was in the stand. And the teacher began to teach. Sikiru looked over at me with his talking drum under his arm. I learned that's how you're supposed to hold it. And he smiled and nodded at me. And there we started to play. Gungoro, 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 gungoro. This was the mantra of Baba Olatunji. As the day went on, we played more and more rhythms, and I was really getting into it. It was hypnotic. The drum started to talk to me. I went into some kind of hallucinatory state, and the faces in the drum were making sounds like, whoa. I kept playing. I got addicted. Later, a drummer came over to me who had been sitting playing a conga. And he said, hey, do you have a drum to play? And I said, well, no, I just had that little talking drum, and Sikiru said I shouldn't play that and I needed a bigger drum. He said, well, I have some extra congas in my car. If you walk out with me, way out into the field where my van is parked, I'll loan you one for the whole time. Wow! And another amazing gift given to me. So I took him up on it. The week went on. I got so hooked. When I came back from it, all I wanted was a djembe. I called stores. I called people who knew people who knew people that might know somebody who had a drum. I stayed up for 3 days and 3 nights straight, completely obsessed with the idea of getting one of these drums. I found a drum store in Philadelphia that said they usually have them in small quantity, but there weren't any there. I was devastated, but I didn't give up. And then, the next day, I got a phone call, and it was that drum store. And they said, this is the weirdest thing. Somebody had bought this big, beautiful djembe from us, and he just brought it back and handed it to us like a hot potato and said, I don't want this. This is not for me. Do you want to come down and check it out? So I jumped in my car and drove the 60 miles to get to the store, and I fell in love. That's my first drum. At one point, she split and threatened to self-destruct. I took her head off, and I had a friend of mine who did woodworking fix her. She's traveled all over the United States with me and still here. I haven't played her in a while, but she's in my heart always. And I learned from Baba that I don't possess this drum. I have the opportunity to be the caretaker. What are the things in life that we think we possess, but really we're just the caretaker of?